In early 2011, I returned to Durban from Johannesburg. I, uh, I actually was yearning to come back to Durban because my parents were here. My dad was aging. He was plagued with all sorts of heart problems. And I didn't want to miss out on the last few years of my dad's life. I wanted to be here for him. And so I took a job offer here in Durban, and my family and I relocated. Unfortunately, that job didn't work out. Call it creative differences or whatever, but within a few months, I found myself out of a job and without the option of going back to Joburg. I really didn't want to go back to Johannesburg. I didn't want to backtrack, and I wanted to see what I could do for myself here in Durban. And it was a difficult time. It was a difficult time because it was unexpected, and the the options for Java developers in Durban was very, very limited. Still is limited, even these days. So my family and I went through a bit of a rough time. What did we do? Now that was a time where I had an option either to fold and to make some incorrect decisions or to make some correct decisions. And I'm glad to say that I did make some correct decisions. By early 2012, I had won the Vodacom AppStar Award. So what did I decide to do? I decided at that point to, rather than resigning myself to what life had thrown me, I decided, let me take things a bit forward. Let me do something that I've never done before in my life. And I built this app called Arithmetic, and I submitted it into the Vodacom AppStar Award. Of course, there was a lot of encouragement from family and friends, no doubt. But ultimately I did, and it won. And that launched an entire business. It launched my career in a very big way, because even though I don't focus on that part of the business any longer, I actually started teaching people how to develop apps, and that became the foundation for IT Varsity. Now let's think about all the things that could have gone wrong in that year, or things that I could have done wrong. Look, I lost my job. That was the fact of the matter. I could have complained about it. I could have whined about it. I could have folded. I could have just, remained miserable and upset at the whole world for what happened to me. I could have played victim. But rather than that, I decided, let me fight back. Let me fight back harder this time with all of my creativity, with everything that I had. I had to learn a completely different way of programming computers, because up until then, I was a Java programmer. I was trained in back-end development, not in mobile app development. And mobile apps were something very new at that time. I mean, the iPhone was only released in 2008, and we are talking about 3 years later now. So I had to teach myself this new paradigm of coding. I built this app and I put it out against all the odds. And I'm so glad that I did. Now, this is not me tooting my horn. This is me being grateful for the fact that I was equipped, I was brought up to be able to make that decision. And I'll tell you how and why I couldn't have made another decision. That was the decision that I would have made because it was programmed into me. But before I go there, let me tell you another story. Now, many of you are familiar with the company Victorinox, the company that makes the Swiss Army knives. Now, for decades, if not almost a century, the Swiss Army knife was Victorinox's main product. And it's something that everybody wanted. And this was further promoted by the series MacGyver. For those of you who are old enough, you'll know what I'm talking about. So because of MacGyver, every teenager wanted to have a Swiss Army knife. Well, not teenagers, even older guys. I still own a Swiss Army knife. But the company suffered a major setback after 9/11, when airports started and planes started banning even Swiss Army knives on passengers, right? So if you had a Swiss Army knife in your bag, in your hand luggage, they would ask you to trash it before you could go into the plane. And I personally got into a lot of trouble for mistakenly taking my Swiss Army knife in my bag, because it's something that we carry about with us day by day. It's not something you think about. And so there were a couple of occasions where my Swiss Army knife was in my everyday carry bag, and I got flagged at the airport. And the one point I had to leave my knife at the airline counter, and I never saw it again, unfortunately. But nonetheless, my sons bought me another one, which up till now still stays in my cupboard. But that's not the point. The point is that this company, because of this rule, suffered a major setback, because people just stopped buying these Swiss Army knives. And so the company was in a major quandary. So what did they do? Now, this is a story I heard from Simon Sinek, right? What they did was absolutely pure genius. They started to diversify the company from knives into watches and clothing. And now the knives have become just one of their products in their product range. It's not the major product. Their major products now are their watches and their clothing. Not only that, but over time, the company had built up major cash reserves. So during that tough time, they were able to keep the company sailing with those cash reserves. Another genius move they did was they began to loan their staff to other companies. So rather than retrenching people, and losing their valuable workforce, for those people who they didn't have any immediate work for, they basically seconded them to other companies where they would work off-site, they would earn their living from there, and when the company needed them back, then they would come back to the company. So now, this is a very good example of a company that is built not for stability, but built for resilience, because it was almost as if this move happened so quickly, this transition happened so quickly, it was almost as if it was planned for. It was almost as if that this unexpected circumstance, this contingency was always in the back of their minds, that someday something like this might happen, which tells me that this is a company that was based on resilience rather than on stability, and so they bounced back. Now, throughout history, you'll find this. People, individuals, companies, organizations that were geared for resilience were the ones who survived. They are the ones who not just survived, but thrived throughout history. And those who wanted stability, those who became comfortable where they were, unfortunately, when change happened, and change happens, change always happens. When that change happened, they couldn't survive. I mean, famous companies that we can think of, that I can think of off the top of my head, are companies like Nokia that didn't survive that whole shift into the smartphones because they were very comfortable with who they were and what they were doing. They weren't geared for resilience. They were geared for stability. Now, what happens to us as human beings when times get tough? Now, a lot of people go into what I like to call the dopamine comfort zone. What does this mean? It means that when you find that things suck around you, when you find that life sucks, what happens is most of us, we start to find comfort in other avenues, in things like eating. We tend to overeat, or we tend to spend time doing frivolous, pointless kind of things like wasting time on social media, binging on TV series, playing video games. And we spend hours and hours doing this. And there's a reason for it. And it's actually a very logical reason, not a good one, but a logical reason. It's because it helps us to escape. It helps us to escape the difficulty of our lives. It helps us to escape facing those demons, facing those challenges head on. The better thing to do, the easier thing, not better, but the easier thing to do is to hide away from all of these challenges and go and drown yourself in some short form videos. Spend hours upon hours watching short form videos or binging on a series or playing video games. And playing video games is good because the risks that you face there are not real risks. You die, you respawn and you continue. Things just move on. It's much easier to cope in a video game than in real life. And it's much easier to look at short form videos of other people's success than to work hard towards our successes. Or it's much easier to look at TV series where there's a hero that's doing all the hard work, that's fighting the villains, that's making life better for everyone, that's making the world a better place. Somebody else is doing it. It's much easier. But the trouble is, it causes damage. It causes us some serious damage. Because what that does is, it puts us into a negative spiral, a downward negative spiral. You start engaging in these kinds of behaviors. And this is still mild behavior, right? You can imagine that people get into more destructive behavior. They get into alcoholism, drugs, etc. You name it, nasty things. So when you start doing that, does your problem go away? Does your life start to unsuck? No, it doesn't. Neither does the problem go away, nor does your life improve in any way. But that little bit of escapism left you feeling a little good, a little happier, a little safer, a little secure while you were doing it. But the moment you come out of that, things are probably worse, because if there's anything I know about a problem that's unsolved, is that it gets worse. Whether it's a medical problem, a business problem, a personal life problem, relationship problem, they tend to get worse. That is the law of the universe. And so your problems tend to get worse. And you know what? Because you fail to tackle the problems, it makes you feel worse. It makes you feel more depressed. It makes you feel less respect for yourself. And then what do? If you're not strong, if you're not resilient at that point, you go back into the destructive behavior. And then you come out feeling even worse, and then more destructive behavior, and even worse, until such a point it affects your mental and emotional well-being. Your mental health suffers, your emotional health suffers. You go into a depression, and guess what? Your life just gets suckier and suckier. Your problems just get bigger and bigger, and you don't come out of it. So what is a person to do? How is a person to break out of this vicious spiral, this downward spiral? The answer is an easy one, but implementing is difficult. Now for me, I've been fortunate. I've been fortunate because I grew up learning resilience. The answer is this one word, resilience. That's it. Now what is resilience? Resilience is the ability to bounce back whenever you face any difficulties or hardships. Look, life happens. Life will throw things at you. Life will kick you in the head and knock you down. People will do that to you. Sometimes those closest to you. Sometimes people you trusted in your business. Sometimes clients will do it to you. These things happen. Now, a lot of people aspire for a life of stability. They try to make life more stable for themselves and for their children. But what they miss out on is resilience. See, life can never be fully stable. Things will always happen. Things will always happen. Nasty things sometimes. Accidents, sickness, loss of a loved one. These things happen. Loss in your business, taking a knock financially. These things happen. The trick is not to try and avoid them. It's not to go around. The trick is to go through. The trick is to go through these challenges. And resilience is what will enable you to go through these challenges. It's your ability to bounce back, to bring together all of your personal resources, your mental, emotional resources, all the strength that you have within you, that superpower within you, to pick yourself up and say, look, I've been knocked down hard. Things have been tough, but I'm going to come up and I'm going to come out of this. That's resilience. And that decision that you make at that point is the turning point in your life. It's the turning point that will make you a better, faster, stronger version of yourself. But you have to make that decision. And you have to be conscious about that decision. And you have to stick by that decision. And stick to it until you dig yourself out of the situation that you were in. Now, why did I tell you that I could not have made another decision? Now, I was hardwired from the youngest age to be a resilient human being. And the best lesson I ever had was from the example of my own parents. I mean, I told you the story before in a previous episode. But I love this story because this is a story that is foundational to who I am as a human being. It's foundational to what I am teaching my kids, to every success that I've had, to the very fact that today I run my own business. Everything emanated from this one story, which is the story of the time that my parents lost everything. I was about 17 years old at that time. And I knew they were going through some very difficult financial times. My dad had made some wrong decisions, trusted the wrong people, lost everything, lost even our home, a home that we built, that my dad built, designed and built with his hands. We never got to stay in it one night because we lost our businesses, home, everything. But what did my parents do at that point? Now, this is a point, and this is a psychological study. It's the normal behavior with a lot of couples is that when they face stress like this, they go into a period of difficulty in their relationships. This is normal. But my parents, being abnormal as they were, they got closer together. And even at that young, immature age, I realized that my parents were truly, truly remarkable in how they just joined forces, borrowed some money, some stocks, few goods here and there, started another small little business, and within 2 years they had built up again. And boy, oh boy, did they work hard. I never saw them working so hard. I never saw anybody working so hard and making so much of sacrifice. And that was just one example among so many examples that I've seen in the life of my parents, particularly my dad. My dad was a type of person who seemed to relish when problems arose. I promise you, the man would get bored if things were going well. He was so well trained and groomed in his mind, he was so resilient in his mind that he almost predicted that there's going to be problems. And I remember his habit. Whenever there was a challenge, whenever there was a problem, out came his pencil, which he sharpened with a knife, and his little back of his cigarette carton. And he had this very particular way of raising his eyebrows. Sometimes my family says that I have that too. He would raise his eyebrows and he would sketch something. And he had this very particular way of clearing his throat while he was thinking. And it was like, and he was thinking. That's when I knew, we all knew my dad was in thinking mode. And he would solve the problem and move on and find another solution or find another problem to solve. Now that was what I was exposed to throughout my life. And so when I face difficult moments in my life, up till today, when I face difficult moments, sometimes I look at my kids and I see them folding. I look at my staff, I see them falling apart. And then I have to come to the rescue. I have to pick everybody up. It's funny that I didn't imprint on my kids as much as my parents had such an influence on me. But nonetheless, I enjoy solving problems. I have come to realize over the years that life is always going to give you surprises, nasty surprises. And the decisions you make at that point, the real-time decisions that you make, are what is going to make you into a better person or just leave you where you are and let the whole world move on without you. And then you sit back and wonder, why is that person succeeding? Why is that person doing so well? And why am I left behind? It's because you chose to go around rather than through. You chose to just avoid the problem rather than solve it. The problems in your life, the challenges that you faced. But if you did choose to fight right through, then you would be a much better version of yourself within days, within weeks and months, let alone years. You'll see the difference. Solve the one problem. Fight the one, just the one temptation to waste time playing video games or going and watching short form videos or binging on series, and just pick up a book on self-upliftment. Just do it one time and see the difference it makes to your mind and your heart, to your mental health and your emotional health. Or take a walk in nature. Listen to an audiobook, listen to a motivational talk, listen to my podcast while you are taking a walk in nature, instead of engaging in your destructive behavior, in your pointless destructive behavior. And then take one step, just one tiny step towards action, and you'll see the difference. Now, most of us don't realize that we are much, much stronger than we think. We are really, truly much stronger than we think. You are stronger than you think. And this I learned from my gym trainer, my personal fitness trainer. So I've got this trainer, Jason, a young guy, thick built, reminds me of the character from Reacher, the TV series Reacher. It looks like the guy trained. He's got the build. He's a rugby player. And he's young enough to be my son. I think he's 23. He's the exact age as my youngest son, Zach. And whenever I go to the gym and I'm working out under his guidance, he will notice that there comes a point where I'm about to give up. And he says to me, Bilal, you still got 30% more. And for some reason, just because he said that, I just find the strength. So I'll be coming to a point where I'm feeling that my limbs are going to fail, my muscles are going to fail. And he'll push me even harder. And then I will perform. I will do that much better. Just at that point, when I think my body is going to fail, he pushes me harder. So I asked him, I said, Jason, how do you know? He said, well, two things. If I didn't push you harder, I wouldn't be a very good fitness trainer, would I? And the second thing is that it's all psychological. You come to a point where your brain goes into fight or flight response. And to preserve your body, your mind tells you, I've had enough. This happens to all of us, no matter what the difficulty is. It could be physical, it could be emotional, any kind of difficulty. But your mind goes into that flight or fight mode, and then it tells you, stop, absolutely stop, I can't do this anymore. But yet, your body has a lot more, a lot more. Your mind has a lot more to go. Once you push past that fight or flight, once you push past that resistance that your mind puts up, and your mind does this for the best of reasons, right? It does that to protect you, because as far as the mind goes, while you are working out, you are hurting your body. Because working out is physically putting pressure on your muscles and hurting your muscles until they respond and they become stronger, right? So your mind perceives this as pain, and it tries to protect you from pain by telling you stop. But you know that's good pain. You know that self-induced good pain with a very constructive vision at the end, which is you want to be fitter, you want to be stronger. And so when you push past that, then your mind takes a step back and says, okay, you know what you're doing, I'm going to let you go into manual mode now. And it lets you roll into manual mode. And so this is how you grow. Now, when it comes to us at work, in our families, in our relationships, and our children, most importantly, we try to protect ourselves. We do what our minds do. We try to protect our children. We want to bring them up in the most sterile environments. We want to keep them safe from every possible thing. But little do we realize that we are hurting them more. By trying to keep them safe, we are hurting them even more. How so? Because we are not always going to be around. I know there are lots of moms who wish that as the little one goes to university, they could follow them there. When they graduate, they could be there. When they get their first job and go to work every day, they could be there. There must be some crazy psycho moms that are like that. But reality check, you can't. You just can't do that. You don't have that. So what do? At some point, you're gonna let those little nestlings leave the nest and go fly out into the world and make their own way, fight their own fights, overcome their own challenges. That's life, people. That's just the way life is. So we need to bring in that resilience into our lives and the lives of our children. And the best way to do this is to face challenges right through. Remember, try to picture a circle, right? Instead of going around that circle, go right through it. That's it. Teach your kids to power through and persevere through whatever challenges they go through. And teach them, before that, to make a conscious, real-time decision that no matter what the challenge is, no matter what the stressor is, I'm going to face up to it. Chest out like a warrior. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to face up to it. And teach them to love to take on those challenges. Teach them to find a certain kind of joy in taking on those challenges and fixing whatever the problem is in their own lives. Don't always try to be there to fix their problems. Let them learn to fix their own problems. And you as the parent, learn to fix your own problems. Don't run away from them. I know it's tempting. I know sometimes you just want to escape. I know you just want to run away from it. But how long and how far are you going to run away from it? Think of all the opportunities you are depriving yourself of by just running away from the problem. On the other side of that problem, I promise you, there is success. There is happiness. There's a better life for you. Now, another thing that I like to do is, I like to think of inspirational quotes. I have some very, very good inspirational quotes that drive me, always. That no matter how bad I'm feeling, no matter how down I'm feeling, I always go back to those quotes and they pick me up. And my favorite is what my grandmother used to tell me when I was growing up. I grew up with her. And as I was growing up, and right now, I'm actually thinking about it because it's the month of Ramadan, I'm fasting. You probably can hear my voice is quite dry. And when I was a kid, she used to make me fast. And then come 10, 11 o'clock in the day, after running around the yard like a mad person, I would come to her and say, "Ma, I'm thirsty." Then she would give me that famous quote. She said, "Indeed, God is with those who are resilient." Every single time. No matter what my difficulty, "Ma, my leg is paining. Ma, I'm sick. Ma, I don't want to go to school. Ma, this homework is too difficult." Indeed, God is with those who are resilient, who power through, who push through, who make something of themselves. You are going to grow up. You're going to be a big person one day. You're going to be an educated person. She used to tell me things like this. And so up till today, whenever I think about this, whenever I face any difficulties and I feel like even I'm folding, I think of that. In fact, it's a saying that it's a quote she got from the Quran. The Arabic goes as, "Inna Allah ma'as sabirin." Indeed, God is with those who are resilient. Now, some people translate sabirin as patient. It's not got to do with patience. The word sabirin is not patient people, it's resilient people. People who spring back. And I used to ask her, what does this mean? She said, see, in life, God puts us through tests. And for those people who stand up, dust themselves, scrape that knee that got hurt, and be strong, God has extra mercy for them and He helps them even more. But those who stay down on the floor and they just complain and whine about their lives, they're thirsty, they're not feeling well, they're tired, they got hurt. Those people, God doesn't have as much mercy for them and His help doesn't come to them until such a point they get up. So my grandmother used to guilt trip me into being a more resilient person. But it made such a big difference in my life. It's what made me do better at school. It's what made me become a better person. It's what made me handle life so much more efficiently, so much more effectively as compared to if I hadn't been given those lessons. And up until today, she passed away, 27 years ago. But up until today, the things she taught me still carry me. And not just me, but my entire business and my team and my students and my family and anybody who is associated with me. Now, I want to finish off with just one more quote from Nelson Mandela, who was another one of my favorite people. He said, "Don't judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." That's resilience. I mean, the man's life was the epitome of resilience. He's a person who could have been a very, very successful big city attorney. He was. And he gave that all up for the freedom struggle, just to get his people out of the oppression of apartheid and into a life where they lived with dignity. For decades, 27 years he spent in prison. I mean, that's only part of the bigger freedom struggle. I mean, since the 1940s, there was apartheid in South Africa where people of color were humiliated. They couldn't do some of the most basic things like go and swim in certain beaches. You know, I recall a story when I was growing up. I must have been about 7 or 8 years old, and my youngest brother was 4 years younger than me. He must have been 4 or 5 years old. We went to the beach in Durban, and there was a section of the paddling pools that was for kiddies. And as we approached, the guard stopped us and said, "Sorry, this is for whites only." But he looked at my youngest brother, who was 2 shades lighter than me. 2 shades lighter than me, and he said, "Okay, we'll allow this one, but not those." So I felt so much of resentment at that point, even as a child. And it was stupid. It was the most stupid thing I had ever imagined, that one brother could go and swim because he was 2 shades lighter, and the other brothers, myself and my younger brother, couldn't go because we weren't light enough in our skin. It was terrible. It was a terrible time. The black people in this country suffered the worst. And to go through all that, to struggle through all that, and to have the whole world call you a terrorist. I mean, Mr. Mandela was called a terrorist. He was only out of the terror list while he was the president of South Africa. But before then, the entire West called him a terrorist. Somewhere in the middle, in the late 1980s, they grew a conscience and they started to impose sanctions on their friends, the nationalist government. And from there, things started changing, and, well, we know what happened. But if it wasn't for the resilience of those heroes of the freedom fighters, people like Nelson Mandela, Ahmed Kathrada, people that stuck it out no matter what and said, "We are not going to budge. Until our people get their rights, until they get freedom, we are not going to budge." We wouldn't have been enjoying the life that we are today in South Africa, which is one of the best countries in the world to live in. Now, with those few words around resilience, I'm going to stop here. I think I'm gone way over time. I'm looking at the time. I was planning for 20 minutes. I think I'm gone up to 35 minutes. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave me a comment. If you didn't like something, leave me a comment also. And tell others about my podcast. And I'll see you in the next episode.